start with this one line that I've read somewhere. It says, we're all works in progress. It's not something that I've come up with, it's something that I've read somewhere, and I think it's kind of pertinent to a lot of our lives. It's something that kind of kept me ticking. One of my earliest memories as a storyteller is when I was really young, maybe 4 years old. I used to sit on the floors of our old Kolkata house, and I had these chalk pits, and I would draw on the floor and make up these stories and talk to myself. Sounds a little crazy, but yeah, I really liked doing that. Somebody would come from behind and wipe the floor clean and start all over again. Growing up in Kolkata at that point in time, I had some very straightforward ambitions. I was studying in school, move on to college, appear for a degree, try and become an engineer or a diploma holder or something. But well, I had a surprise coming for me. Cut to about when I was 17 or 18, I started taking some of the exams that every one of us has taken, the joint entrances, the IITs. Some of you have cleared it effortlessly, but I really did miserably in them. I flunked all of them, and I realized that I had no aptitude for them. So I started thinking, what could I do now? And well, it goes back to me that I thought, okay, I've always been interested in visual arts, and I thought maybe I'd give that a shot. I tried getting into some art colleges, but that also didn't work out because I'd never really kind of looked at visual arts as something more than a hobby. So, but I wasn't going to give up because I really thought I had something going there. So I hit restart button and started all over again. I started doing a bit of photography as a, as a journalist, as a photojournalist for newspapers. I started working as a freelance graphic designer, as an illustrator. I started building a portfolio for myself, which I did hands-on. Like, I didn't know how to use a computer back then, and so I kind of drew and designed everything by hand. Lo and behold, that actually got me a job as an advertising creative person, as an art director. Advertising really opened up my world because I suddenly had an exposure to worldwide work. I could see cutting-edge creative work from all around the world. I had colleagues I worked with who influenced my thinking. And around this time, because I was an art director who was kind of training himself, I started reading a lot, listening to a lot of music, and most importantly, watching a lot of films. And I had a lot of cinephile friends who kind of recommended directors. I went to festivals, I spent a lot of time watching films. And I started thinking, it went back to again, that early memory of drawing on the red floor. And I kept thinking that I really enjoyed doing that, telling stories through images. And it's something that I wanted to do. I wanted to make films. But it's just that I didn't know how. In the advertising business, you end up making a lot of films for clients, ad films. But that's usually something that, as a creative person, you write a script and a director takes over, such as myself today. And back in that time, it was still not digital, so everything was made on film stock, which is pretty expensive. So for a young person at that time to think that, okay, camera and shoot a film was going to be quite impossible, prohibitive, so to speak. So I thought, what could I do to kind of teach myself how to write a story? Dipped into my credit card and I started taking an online course with UCLA. I wanted to learn how to write a screenplay. And it was a rewarding experience because, first of all, I didn't know how to write, as in write a script in that sense. And I ended up writing a 100-page script about my early life in Mumbai. And it taught me a lot of things, like the 3-act structure, the poetics of Aristotle. A lot of people disagree with that format, but it's at least a start. It gave me a start. And the other thing I did was I traveled a lot. I traveled all over India, and I started taking pictures. And I just started experimenting with my camera, learning lensing, learning depth of field, learning composition. Something else happened around this time which impacted filmmaking as such worldwide. Canons and the Nikons of the world launched these cameras called DSLRs. And DSLRs were these cameras that could shoot footage, they could shoot videos, like film cameras, cinematic footage. Is the one thing that kind of impacted filmmaking in the last 10 years. I mean, today you have so many filmmakers in the world simply because of DSLRs coming around. It democratized filmmaking. And the other thing that happened was internet speeds went up. So, there was a proliferation of films and videos and filmmaking techniques and tutorials online. And I started spending a lot of time with them. Around this time, I kind of had this idea, because I've always looked at myself, I've traveled all over the country. I started in Kolkata, moved to Mumbai, I lived in Delhi for a bit, I then moved to Bangalore. So I was myself pretty much a migrant. And I looked at these boys in the building who used to deliver, stuff to our homes. And I always thought, there's an interesting story of these two migrant worlds colliding, a voyeuristic home delivery boy. So I kind of wrote a script about this boy, and I decided to make this film. I kind of started putting all the skills that I had, whatever I had learned of photography, whatever I had learned of art direction, whatever I had learned of filmmaking from looking at other filmmakers in advertising, and I decided I'll make a film. I got together these bunch of young actors, and I told them, I can't pay you, but I'll give you pot noodles every night, so come and stay at my place, and we started making this film. So I'd get back from work at 9 o'clock, and we start shooting this film. This is great. Just keep the volume. This is a story about this young, home delivery boy that I started making, and it was not without challenges, because the first time around when I started making the film, half the crew and the cast left in some days, and I wasn't giving up, so I restarted making the film. As I started making the film again, I made a lot of mistakes, of course. I designed the production myself, I handled the camera myself, I trained the actors myself, I turned my house upside down. My wife was mad at me, but she was also very supportive. The film was kind of flawed in a way, in the sense that there were lots of mistakes in it. There were axis jumps, there were continuity errors. The sound was really botched. I had to redo the sound all over again. But yeah, it didn't go to any festival, because most festivals rejected it, except for 2. But it did one thing for me. It kind of, it's the first time, it's like baptism by fire. It made me understand what it takes to make a film. And the second thing it did was, it kind of got me a scholarship in a tiny film exchange program that was being held between Suchitra CFD in Bangalore and Gothenburg University. Now, this was very different from anything that I'd ever done. I was used to the advertising school of filmmaking, which is always sleek, well produced, well designed. And this, for the first time, was going to be a program in which I was going to be doing non-fiction filmmaking, which means basically go out there and shoot real stories, real people, real time. You put together the footage, you put together the audio, you make a narrative out of it. And it was basically an introduction to documentary filmmaking. And it really opened up my world, because I thought that now I didn't have to really wait for a story. I mean, the stories were out there. I need to just point my camera at it and go out there. And next one. So I started shooting everything. I started shooting fishermen in Pondicherry. I started shooting musicians in Berlin. I started shooting musicians in Mumbai. In fact, I went to Ladakh, and I shot a little bit on people migrating out of Ladakh, in search of better education for their kids. And all of this was practice for me. I was kind of spending money out of my own pocket to make these films, and learning to make film, because I didn't expect to get anything back from these films, neither to monetize them. I was going to simply, this was my film school. I was learning to make films by making these films. And then something happened at work. There's a brand I worked on, and I think, like my profile mentions, I worked on this brand, Anouk, for a very long time. And we were working on a bunch of films for this brand. And it was about this ethnic fashion brand. And ethnic fashion is always looked at as the prescribed, the safe, the conservative choice. We wanted to create a campaign about bold women. And the point of view was that Western fashion is always bold outwardly, and ethnic fashion, our counterpoint was bold inside. The choices that you make made you bold. And we had this series of stories, and maybe some of you have seen these, about women making bold choices. And I got the opportunity to make this film because a colleague of mine suggested that I should take it on. And it really was like a testing ground for all my skills that I had kind of acquired. I wanted to make them a little different from the usual advertising filmmaking. I wanted to make them more real. I worked with a cinematographer who's also a documentary filmmaker, Ranjan Palid. And the performances were underplayed, the settings were more real, and the film stood out in the crowd on the internet simply because they felt less like ads and more like stories. And of course, the national media picked it up, people talked about it, people wrote about it, and there was a whole series of these films, and it made a lot of sense to my life at that point in time because it gave me the confidence to jump into filmmaking head first, which is also, in a way, it's not easy when you quit a job and you sit on your backside waiting for projects to happen. So I started my own company, Sweet Spot Media. I started with a friend of mine. We started making a new film, Playgrounds. I also started shooting a film with Radhika Apte for the same brand, Anouk. And so these are two different experiences that I was having at the same time. I was, on the one hand, a film like this is, it's well produced, it's got budgets to, get locations, professional actors, a technically superior crew, all of that. And on the other hand, I was making Playgrounds, my own film, which was funded by us, so we had no money, but we were, working guerrilla style. We would go to places and shoot and get out. We were working with theater actors or non-actors and training them. There was practically no support. You had no light. You got a location if you could tell a good story to somebody and get away with it. You could possibly get arrested for all you care, but those are the risks you take to make a film like this. So at the same time, I was doing two different kind of narratives, and the only thing that I always kept constant was that, it felt real. It felt like a great story to be told. Both of them have their benefits. The next film for Anouk also made headlines. Playgrounds went to win a whole bunch of awards all over the world. It went to Hong Kong, it went to Los Angeles, it went to Stuttgart, Melbourne, London. We've traveled with the film, we've learned so much from people, from other filmmakers, from production companies, from producers and jury members about filmmaking worldwide. What cuts through always a great story, I mean, no matter where, no matter what context. It's a quintessentially Indian story, but nonetheless, it kind of resonated with people across the world. And that just kind of brings me back to, where I started from. I said that, your work's in progress. The reason why that resonates for me is that when I started making films, when I started telling stories, I did not have the skill set to do so. But I did it nonetheless, and I kept doing it. With every film that I made a bunch of mistakes, and got some things right. And the next film kind of promoted me to make another set of correct moves, but another set of mistakes. But with every story I told and every film I made, I have gotten better. That's the whole point of being in work in progress, being kind of evolving, changing, and adapting to something that we love doing. And that, I think, applies to filmmaking as much as everything else.